Good morning from Montreal, and good evening or good afternoon or wherever you are in the world. This is a very, very select group of executives from all over the world. This is not a public webinar. Just a quick introduction. I'm sure you probably know a little bit about my background, but it doesn't help to align and tell you a little bit about why we're here. So my name is Mo. I am the former Chief Business Officer of Google X. I spent 12 years in total at Google. Before that, I worked at Microsoft and I worked at IBM. Both at the time when those companies were instrumental at changing our world. So at Google, I assumed two roles over 12 years. First, I was the Vice President of Emerging Markets. I basically started in 2007, where Google was quite successful in the Western or the advanced world, if you want, but had very, very limited presence elsewhere. And by limited presence, I don't only mean sales and business, but also even languages and services. So we didn't have Google in many, many languages, and we didn't have the entire infrastructure of the internet. Actually, was non-existent in some of the markets around the world. And so my job as VP of Emerging Markets was to expand Google globally. And so I started close to half of Google's offices globally. So basically from the beginning of the operation to launching the products, localizing the languages, really giving a commercial and information value to the internet. And so I come with a lot of experience in markets around the world that are the non-Western world. I then moved in 2013 to Google X, the innovation arm of Google, known for moonshots like Project Loon or self-driving cars and so on. And my job there was the Chief Business Officer, where I was, doing two things, mainly basically trying to land those innovations in the real world. Sometimes those innovations were drastically science fiction-like. And the other was to actually be instrumental in building what we call the innovation factory, which are two words that normally don't go together. From one side, you want to have the creativity and openness to be innovative. And from the other side, you want to have the discipline to actually produce something at the end of the day, not just end up being a research center, if you want. And so between those two, my job was to look at the components of that innovation factory that interfaced with the real world, and the business, even though not necessarily the profitability at the early stages, but definitely the revenue potential and business planning and so on. Between those two, I think I've gained a tremendous amount of experience in one of the areas that are supposed to be one of the most innovative places on earth. Some of you may know me as the author of Solve for Happy, an engineer's approach to happiness, which is an international best-selling book that launched last March, and some March 2017, I apologize. And some will know me as the founder of 1 Billion Happy, which is an effort that I left Google in March 2018 to focus entirely on through the idea of how desperate our world needs happiness, and how happiness needs an alternative approach that is not just based on spirituality or based on practice and meditation and so on. And so part of my 1 Billion Happy mission is, believe it or not, removing the reasons for unhappiness, the global reasons for unhappiness, which is, the plan is a very long 7-year plan, believe it or not. And the idea is it comes in stages. And one of the stages is to remove the reasons for global unhappiness. And one of the reasons for global unhappiness, if you ask me, is that most of our innovation and intellect is just chasing money. while there is nothing wrong with money, the idea of innovating for good and then making a lot of money is something that's very dear to my heart and something that Google has done very, very well. And so if you actually look at how Google innovated across the years, search, for example, as a product didn't make money at the beginning, but it really solved a massive problem, which is democracy of information and access to knowledge around the world. And even though we take Google for granted today, it's actually hard to imagine how life would be without it. And so having done that, Google then earned the right not just to make money, but to be one of the largest companies in the world. $100 billion of revenues, predictable, successful, and the resources to be able to innovate even further using the money and profits that we make. So today I want to talk to you about something I call the Age of Sci-Fi, to try and explain to you a little bit from an insider's point of view where technology is going, why technology is heading in that direction, but also how to apply the new reality of our world to every business, not only technology. This will be the theme of today. I'll try to share with you a few charts and a few technologies that you need to be aware of. Not too much. I'll try to cover my presentation in 30 minutes, and then the whole idea, is to get your questions and turn this into a conversation. So the plan for this webinar series is that I hope to be able to hold one every 45 days to 60 days, but more hopefully towards the 45 days. I travel quite extensively. I've been around the world around 8 times so far this year. And so it might be difficult to time it exactly on 45 days, but that's the target. And I would hope that the theme of every future webinar comes from you, so that we have a communication channel between us where you are able to basically tell us, let's cover artificial intelligence, let's cover robotics, let's cover whatever. The overall theme for this webinar series is going to be the future of the workplace, and basically how we need to evolve as organizations to become more successful, more innovative, more impactful, more positive, and at the same time more happy. And so within that theme, it's important to understand quite a few things. So let's jump in for today's conversation. I call this the Age of Sci-Fi, and it's really about understanding how far technology has gone. Sometimes we sort of miss out, because we take things for granted, how incredibly science fiction like our lives look today. And if you take anything that you have interacted with today from a technological point of view, including just sitting here and having this conversation, 50 of us, where we're all over the world discussing such an important topic. Those kinds of technologies, if you had thought about them just 50 years ago, they would totally appear to be science fiction. If you had asked your grandmother in 1970 and said, hey, we're going to be having video conferences just like in Star Trek, she would have definitely thought you're like, yeah, you're a little delusional. But all of that happens, and all of that keeps happening, to the point that when we interact with technology today, we sort of take it for granted. You have an iPhone that packs in it more compute power than the entire space craft that landed on the moon. And when the battery doesn't last a full day, you sort of complain about it. It's like, it's taken for granted that this thing should work, and should work the entire day and never fail. And so it's important to understand, why is it that technology is moving so fast? Just to put things in perspective, technology is not only moving fast, it's moving faster and faster and faster. So, if you take any two technologies, any classic technologies such as the TV and the internet, which are two technologies we're very familiar with, to get to the same penetration numbers, it took the TV 100 years, it took the internet 15 years to achieve the same penetration. When you really think about it, it took Facebook around 7 years, it took Instagram around 2. And so it keeps moving faster and faster. And sometimes I joke and I say, it took Jesus around 2,000 years to reach, more than 1 billion people, and it took Larry Page less than 15, right? And this is the kind of, of impact that technology is having on our life, that an idea, an ideal, an approach to life can spread to the entire world in 4 to 5 years. And it's not unlikely that some new technology will come up this or next year and spread to 1 billion people within the next 1 or 2 years. The reason for that, when you really think about it, is understood in what I call horsepower, but in other reasons as well. So, let's take some of the common technologies as an analogy. If you take cars, for example, this is the history of a company like Audi or VW Group, if you want. They had Auto Union had a car that had somewhere around 50 horsepower in the 60s, 70s. The Quattro had a couple of hundred horsepower. The Audi R8 today has 560, and the Bugatti Veyron there is now a new Bugatti, is close to 1,500 horsepower. Now, if you take that kind of progress, 25x or so, it's actually quite impressive, that you can develop technologies over 50 years that are 25x the performance. But that actually doesn't compare at all, if you think about it, to information technology and computers. So if you take computers, they follow a different path. They follow what we call Moore's law. And what I'm showing you here is some of the older numbers. Actually, I stopped updating this slide because you get the point. Moore's law, if you've ever had an XT or an AT IBM compatible computer, we had those 33 megahertz, and we thought that this was incredible compute power or horsepower, if you want. And look at how far we've come. Moore's law has held true to the point where we are close to 1 million times where we started. Now, 1 million times is significantly more impactful than 25 times. And Moore's law continues to hold true. The compute processing power or computer, horsepower, if you want, will grow, it will double every 18 months at the same price. And even as there are some people today that will tell you, oh, but this is about to stop, the nature of silicon might not be stretched anymore. Look at, how we're doing cloud computing or maybe quantum computing, and understand that, yes, maybe this kind of technology will stop, but there will be others that will continue. Now, this is not the only thing about those technologies. I call that the technology acceleration curve. The other thing about this technology is that we use this technology to build more of the same technology. So when you have a car engine, the best you can do with it is to move a car very fast. When you have a computer, then you can actually, a faster computer, you can use that to build an even faster computer. And of course, the other side of it is how the internet came into that play. So today, because of the internet, everyone can innovate. So don't take this lightly at all. And most of us who work in large organizations miss that, miss the idea of democracy of information that we live through today. So everyone, whether it's a curious young kid in Africa or an MIT student, we all have the exact same access to the exact same information. It's just a matter of interest and effort for you to learn anything that you want. There is no restrictions on that anymore. If you learn, you have all of the tools that you need. When you think about the old days where big companies had the ability to build things because they had access to expensive software or to expensive tooling and so on, that's no longer the case. There is so much open source software. There are so many services that are available for free. There are so many services in the cloud that you can build at a totally Google quality level for $10 a month. Google itself and Amazon and the others will share the best of their technologies, like their AI engines and so on, for everyone to use for a cloud monthly payment. And of course, if you manage to build any of that, what happens is that you can sell that around the world because the internet has created that global market where Alibaba, for example, sells everywhere in the world and becomes one of the largest commerce sites on earth. Finally, this technology growth continues to dazzle us, but it doesn't dazzle us only because of Moore's law. It dazzles us because of another curve I call the technology development curve, which you only start to be aware of if you work inside one of those technology engines, such as Google. And the technology development curve is hidden. You see the impacts of it after the breakout point. So technology will take a very long time to develop to get to a point where we find the true breakthrough. When we find the true breakthrough, then technology would accelerate very quickly using Moore's law, and products will accelerate very quickly, using the product adoption curve, the S curve that we saw at the beginning. But the idea of getting to that breakout point, to that inflection point, is actually something that we mostly don't know about unless you're living inside one of those labs. And so in reality, the technology adoption curve looks more like this. It looks more like an inverted hockey stick, where it takes a very long time to do the research. And then those who are aware of the breakout point, these are the ones that actually benefit the most. And so, I'm using here artificial intelligence, which is a big buzzword in the world today. To give you an example, artificial intelligence is what we've been hearing about so much for the last 5-10 years. But this is nothing new at all. Artificial intelligence actually started in the 50s with something that's called the Dartmouth experiment or Dartmouth workshop, which launched the idea of AI. Even I, as a young developer in my very early, teen years, I was, dreaming of making my computer intelligent, and I attempted to use artificial intelligence, but it took such a long time, and it went through what we call two AI winters. Where the economic situation around the world in 1973 and in the 80s actually stopped people from investing in AI for a short while, and also because the results were not coming in. Only when deep learning happened in the 2000s, only when deep learning happened and the ability to build neural networks based on deep learning is when we started to get the movements that we get today. And with deep learning, unprompted AI, and the possibility now of commercial AI systems, this is literally going through the roof. Not because it's something that we discovered in the year 2000 or 2002, 2000, whatever. It's because it's something that we've invested in since the 1950s and then broke out in the year 2000 with deep learning. Now, those two curves, when you put them together, the technology, So I should probably highlight that there are 5 technologies, I believe, that have definitely come to that breakout point. And you need to be totally aware of those technologies, depending on what business you're in. And maybe we should dedicate a full webinar, or maybe you should ask some questions around any of those that you're curious about. Those 5 are robotics. And robotics, not as understood by science fiction movies, robotics are not humanoids and they're not hardware. Robots are mainly intelligent software code that enables a machine to take decisions independently of its programming, based on independently of rigid programming, based on variable input that comes from the world around it. So the closest you have to a real robot today, in my view, would be a self-driving car, which takes decisions to stop and move and signal and do other things, almost like a human, based on the situation it's in the real world. And of course, this depends massively on machine learning and AI. And so the breakout and the acceleration in machine learning and AI is leading to an incredible growth in robotics. And it's not unlikely that you will see robots running amongst us in the next 10 years at scale. When it comes to machine learning and AI, I think we all know what's happening here. And if you're not following, I'd suggest that you include that in the topics that you're monitoring. Every day today, you get things from Google Assistant calling people and talking to them, as if it's totally a human, all the way to AI solutions that help you in finance and in customer service and in production and in shipping and so on and so forth. The third one, which I think is going to be very, very significant, rarely spoken about in the area of information technology, is what I call life sciences. And life sciences is the idea that we can look at us humans as a highly predictable machine. And, with the understanding of the DNA, with all of the wearable monitoring devices, and with all of the, ability to sort of reprogram some of our DNA and so on, our biology is becoming very much like information technology. It's becoming very much like computer science. And so the integration between those two is definitely opening up a massive, breakthrough in diagnostics, in treatment, in understanding DNA and reprogramming and so on and so forth. Virtual and augmented reality, in my view, is a technology where we sort of underestimate, because I would tend to believe that it was launched in the most exciting, but maybe not the most rich, not the richest sectors. So you saw AI, you saw virtual reality and augmented reality attempting to be with the Samsung phones and others, trying to make it a gaming platform or an entertainment platform. This is going to happen eventually when the headsets are a little less dorky, if you want. But definitely AI and augmented reality, the underlying reality of that is that it's penetrating the enterprise space very, very significantly. So between training, between remote assistance and so on and so forth, providing information for doctors, for someone who's working on an oil rig and so on, this is definitely going to be a place where the revenue generated around virtual and augmented reality is going to be very big in the next 5-10 years, or it's going to continue to grow. And then after that, when the economies of scale kick in, I would also tend to believe that it's going to be part of our consumer lifestyle every day. Finally, the blockchain. While there is, if you ask me, there is no real incredible technology breakthrough in the blockchain, but the idea of building trust without the middleman, the idea of an open ledger where things cannot be forged and where there so much can happen, again, for smaller enterprises, to me is something that is definitely going to shake our world. And it's whichever business you're in, I tend to believe that maybe 2-3 years down the line, you need to be quite aware of how the blockchain might disrupt your own business. As I said, we can talk about these separately. But going back to the technology development curve and technology adoption curve put together, I think the message I wanted to give you today is this. Between those two, and with the current set of breakthrough technologies that we have found, I think we truly are in the age of sci-fi. At Google X, we were attempting to solve big problems that affect billions of people using science fiction-like solutions, if you want, radical solutions. And it's actually quite rare when you think about it, to find something that we can dream of doing today that is not possible technologically. Everything that you've seen in science fiction movies is becoming sort of doable, which is really quite interesting. Huh? So just to give you a few examples, because we take this for granted. These are Star Trek, Minority Report, and iRobot. When those things were shown in the movies, we thought of them as science fiction. The flip phone or the tablet or whatever gadgets that we saw in Star Trek are part of our everyday today. As a matter of fact, the flip phone is not in fashion anymore. It's not even science fact. It's old, right? The interface in Minority Report, where Tom Cruise was waving at the computer, which felt like a total science fiction at the time in 2004. It was available on every Xbox and every PlayStation in 2007, right? 2009. iRobot, 2007, where the self-driving car is now reality with millions and millions of miles that self-driving cars have driven across the world. And so the trick and the thing I'm asking you to do today is to start to use that mindset. The fact that those things we saw in science fiction in the past have all happened, and try to apply it to the things that you still don't believe are going to happen. And here are a few stretch examples. Telepathy, for example. Telepathy is a dream of, I can read your mind and you can read my mind without the need for words. Is this going to happen in your lifetime, time and mine? Of course, right? It's already happened. My daughter is in Montreal. I travel the world all the time, and we chat on WhatsApp using a small screen and a keyboard. But I read her mind and she reads my mind, at least the things we allow each other to read, without the use of words, right? And, can you not imagine that within the next 5-10 years, we'll be able to get rid of the screen? Of course, we will, either in a virtual reality headset or maybe even by interacting directly with your brainwaves. And so, it's actually possible. Teleportation, things like time travel, even things like the movie Avatar, where you can be living a full virtual life somewhere else. All of this is available today in prototype format in virtual reality. So, if you've experimented a little bit with virtual reality, you can literally, swipe on your headset and go anywhere in the world. You can walk the streets of Tokyo and then swipe again and walk the streets of New York, right? You could actually swipe and walk and be on the moon. Samsung launched an experiment where you will actually experience gravity through some cables as if you're on the moon. You could, with all of the gaming platforms really giving a thought to virtual reality, a life that is like Back to the Future or Avatar is actually not very, very difficult. It's maybe not in the physical world, but if you've tried those technologies, or at least the prototypes, they're better than the real world, which I think also throws in a very interesting ethical dilemma. So that mindset is the main message I wanted to leave you with today. The idea that if you had asked the pharaohs about the possibility of building the pyramids differently, or having the cart of the king move faster without adding more horses to it, they would have said thought you were crazy if you said, hey, how about rocks in a bag where we can split those into 50 pounds each, take them up the pyramid, and then turn them into rocks up there. This is cement, right? And cement is a technology that we take so for granted today, but at the time we refused to believe that it was going to happen. Your horse, instead of adding horses, you could pack 1,500 horses in an internal combustion engine and move the vehicle much, much faster. And that mindset is, in my view, the biggest obstacle to innovation today. So when I talk about building the innovation factory at Google X, we had to tackle that very, very strongly. The idea that something is possible before you start thinking about the solution is truly the whole core point. So if you take the history of the automobile industry and how we've tried to make the car safer for 100 years now, and we've managed to make the car safer by adding things like crash avoidance, better lighting, better ABS, and so on and so forth, by adding things like crash worthiness, as they used to call it, crumble zone and zones and airbags and so on, to make sure that you're safe when you actually have an accident. Why would you have an accident in the first place? Instead of thinking about the past of the automobile and trying to make that past safer, more than 90% of accidents happen because of human error. So the right way to do it in the age of sci-fi is to say, let's remove the human error by adding very significant driver assistance, or by making the car totally driverless. And so you can see the efforts that Audi and Mercedes and others are putting in driver assistance systems, where they keep you within the lane, they help you brake if you're not braking well enough, and so on and so forth. Or the efforts that companies like Google and Tesla and Uber and others are doing, to make the cars totally driverless. Now, that kind of thinking is what we used to call a moonshot at Google X. It's not only an approach to making a product better, It's an approach to, one, solving a major problem, not just making another product, but solving it knowing that everything is possible. And for that reason, solving it with a very radical solution that might not have seemed possible 8 years ago or 10 years ago, but is possible today. I understand this. When we started to work on driverless cars back in 2007, 2008, it wasn't possible to make that happen. But because we understood the technology adoption curve and the technology acceleration curve, we knew that if we started to work on it, by the time we are ready, the technology will meet us at the point when we are ready. And that's the kind of thinking that I would like you to take from today's conversation. Basically, I would tend to believe that the biggest challenge to innovation today is a mindset. Everything is possible, okay? And so I would like to change 3 thoughts about you, about the way you look at your business. And then if you change those 3 thoughts, I think you would be on the road to build something as innovative as Google X. And hopefully, as per my mission of what I call positive innovation, which is innovation that makes the world a better place, that you would be in a place to actually really, really be using your business to help make our world a better place. And those 3 assumptions, I apologize for the fault on the slide. Somehow when we uploaded it, it turned into this, but I think you can read it. The three mindsets that we should change is, 1, assume that everything is possible. Just, I guarantee you, unless it contradicts the laws of physics, it's possible in one form or another. The number 2 is I would ask you to adopt a value system that is very reflective of how Google worked, which was the idea of committing to the problem, not to the product, not to the legacy, not to the business plan, not to the money. Committing to a problem first, and knowing that if you actually solve a problem that affects the lives of 1 billion people, and they like your solution so much that they use it twice a day, you're bound to make a lot of money. And that's what Larry used to teach us by calling it the toothbrush test. And the toothbrush test is when we suggested products that were not going to affect the lives of enough hundreds of millions of people, like a toothbrush, where it really solves a problem and people use it twice a day, then it maybe was not worth the effort and money and investment that we put into it. And then the third, and I think the biggest mind shift, is the idea of not settling for incremental innovation anymore. So I am a huge fan of nations like Korea, for example, and I hope we have some Koreans on the webinar today. A nation that is so innovative, so hardworking, so engineering focused, so talented, but invests so much of its innovation power to making a thinner LED screen, or a more fancy telephone. And the idea is, can we shift from making a thinner LED screen to making no LED screen at all? So having a totally radical solution around how people get information. Or even more importantly, realize that a fancier phone is not what we need. Maybe what we actually need, the problem we're dealing with, is a phone that makes my life easier. And maybe if we start to bet on those, commit to the problem, and 10x innovation, then our world will change and become a better world. So with that, I want to remind you that anyone can do this. I don't know which business you are on. We have more than 50 people from all over the world, but I am actually helping companies around the world in every field you can think of, from travel and airline to finance, the core of Wall Street, to manufacturing, and even my own personal moonshots, around 1 billion happy. That's an approach to innovation that actually is an approach that is worthy of our effort, and that moonshot factory, that innovation factory approach is actually possible to deploy in every one of those industries. So I urge you, whatever your industry is, even if you're in retail, in your in food and beverage, whatever it is, I urge you to have that kind of moonshot thinking, and hopefully through our webinar series and any other way I can help, we can get you there. This last slide is very complicated. We will share the slide deck with you also so that we can jump into some of those specifically. But this is the factory-like design. The idea of a governance model that allows us to innovate, but at the same time, be disciplined and produce something predictably. Like at Google X, in the years where I was there, we had the expectation of producing a radical innovation, something like Project Loon, self-driving cars, Project Makani, Google Brain, all of those things every 6 months predictably. Yeah, it might end up being 8 months or so, but imagine changing your world completely every 6 to 8 months. And so this is the model. We won't have the time to talk about it today. I think we would be better off if I pause here and open for questions. So please, type your questions in the chat room, and I'll try to answer as many of them as I can today. So with that, thank you for your time, and I remind you that we should all attempt to make our world a better place. So while the questions come in, I will switch off the slideshow. Okay, so we're starting to have them come in. So Anurag has a question that says, I feel technology has stressed us further and made our minds more stressed. What is Mo's prediction of solving that? This is an incredible question. So one of the reasons why I came to a point where I decided I should not invest the rest of my life in just building further technologies is because technology has rarely ever met the promise. So while I will say with love and admiration that Google has often met the promise. So, when we promised to offer democracy of information, with Google search, I think this promise has constantly been met. So, at the same time, you have to imagine that the promise of mobility, for example, that we're going to have your mobile phone with you everywhere, which allows you to enjoy life and be on a beach while you don't feel that you are, stressed or whatever. That promise, which we saw so much in early mobile phone advertising, is total, hoax. We never got that promise delivered. It's stressing us. We're getting tons, like thousands of emails. I get thousands of emails. And so those promises are not being delivered. Now, is that the challenge of the technology providers? Partially. Of course, it's easier to build a better photo sharing app so that we can make a little more money than it is to really radically change the way things are and help people live a better life. But I also say it is our problem. It's our problem for adopting this, right? So let me give you an example. I decided around 11 years ago that I will never ever watch a violent movie again. Okay, the idea of someone pointing a gun at someone else's head and shooting so carelessly, and I watching this and having my heart not move anymore is wrong. Okay, so believe it or not, Hollywood is a technology. We take it for granted, but the moving picture and where Hollywood is today with all of the computer generated movies is a technology. Now, if we accept the use of that technology in such a violent propaganda way, then it's my mistake. if all of us decide that we're not going to watch violent movies anymore, Hollywood will decide to make more comedies, right? The point that we're contributing in the box office revenues to this kind of technology advancement is what's making this technology continue. So put that in technological context. If iPhone 11 is going to just be fancier and thinner, I think none of us should buy it. I'm nothing against Apple. I have Samsung, the next Samsung S, I don't know what, 10 or 11, going to be just fancier. You shouldn't buy it. I actually still use an Nexus 5 today. Okay, I use an iPhone 6 today. Simply because it's my choice as a consumer to say, unless you give me something that is going to reduce my stress, I don't want another phone. Once we as consumers take a stand and basically stop following that cycle of more and more and fancier and more ego without real functionality, then the technology manufacturers are going to follow. So from one side, I think, yes, I agree, technology is not always meeting the promise. But I think from the other side, part of the 1 billion happy movement is an awakening to the fact of what we need and what we don't need, and using that to force technology providers to make our world a better place. Yanni is asking, do you believe that the continuous and relentless race of business for financial growth helps or hinders innovation, especially innovation for good? That's an incredible question again, Yanni. Thank you so much. So I actually, I don't know why the questions are all around the topic that's between happiness and 1 billion happy's mission and the business and technology. I have a tendency to believe, but that's only my point of view, that we have followed a trend that started with the Great Depression and World War II, the trend that reinforced capitalism so much that truly, no denying, has completely reinvented our world. I mean, when you really think about all of the technological advancements we have today, these are the result of a very greedy capitalist system that is all driven by, let me succeed, let me make more money, and so on and so forth. My tendency is to believe that this trend has outlived its capability, and that the results of that are turning negative. You can easily see the reality of our world today. 1 in every 4 people is clinically depressed in the Western world. Our world, I just got a Gallup report yesterday, is at an all-time high, 30% unhappy. It's antidepressants are at an all-time high. And every one of us feels the stress. Every one of us feels the tension. And in an interesting way, by losing the momentum of making life more and more technologically, by having the technology make our lives better, I feel that there is now a tendency where people are dropping out of the marketplace. Statistics around the use of drugs amongst young people are staggering. Suicide is staggering. And can we continue to grow that way? I actually tend to believe no. A lot of economic indicators around the world are saying, yeah, there is still growth, but not much more, much further, I think. Does that mean that finance and looking for money is a bad thing? No, it's not at all. As a matter of fact, I will always say that the years I've spent at Google, and the reason I adore Google so much, is because our founders, Larry and Sergey, were driven by a value system that was really enlightening. The reason, I would dare say that Google is the largest nonprofit or the largest charity in the world today. If you take a component like search that is democratizing the world for free, right? You don't have to pay anything to use it. Democratizing knowledge. If you take a platform like YouTube that enables freedom of information or freedom of speech in a way that is totally we never expected in places like the Middle East and other places. you have to realize, and of course, the follow-ups to that. So Facebook video today is quite massive, but it started with YouTube. And so those kinds of things happened as a result of finances. That happened as a result of Google being able to actually make enough money to invest in those innovations and make them run for free. So what is the future of impacting the world? The future, in my view, is actually being able to make money by offering good technologies or good solutions that make that make our world better, but also making money so that you can make more of them. And if you're one of the good people that really want to make the world a better place, I urge you to think of that. I urge you to be successful, to be rich, to be powerful, not to buy a fancy Armani suit, but to be able to invent and make the world a better place. I always told my teams, which I always selected very, very carefully, that one of the biggest problems of our world today is that the good are not motivated by the same motivations that the bad people are motivated by. The good don't care about money, they don't care about power, they don't care about influence. They're nice people. But we want the nice people to be in power. We want the nice people to be rich, because these are resources that we can use to continue to make the world a better place. My personal example of that is my work on happiness. So, 1 Billion Happy is a non-for-profit organization. So it basically is loss-making. But it's also, so far, not an organization that raises, fund, that goes for fundraising or asks anybody to pay us any money at all. Okay. As a matter of fact, 1 Billion Happy is funded from Solve for Happy. So solveforhappy.com is an organization that is attempting to build a commercial value to happiness. So things like, life coaches should be trained on happiness in a very engineered way so that they can make a livelihood by making people happy. And if they can make that, and there is a small fraction of this that goes to 1billionhappy.org, then 1billionhappy.org can invest in giving that to people who don't have the economic means to get to it. And that economic cycle, there is nothing wrong with it. There is absolutely nothing wrong with finance. Making money is a good thing. It's making money ethically and making money for a good reason and making money by making a good product to the world. These are the caveats that sometimes people fall into. Yes, so Ted just asked a similar question. He was saying, I'm curious whether you still pursue financial goals. What about the idea of using profits to help others? That's exactly the answer I just mentioned. Of course, I go around the world and I speak publicly and I consult for big companies and so on, and I make a reasonable amount of money, and I'm on several board of directors. But I choose those assignments within my ethics of 1 Billion Happy and positive innovation. And I basically end up wearing $19 t-shirts. And so I've managed to develop a lifestyle where I'm no longer fooled by the dazzling beauty of a Bentley or a fancy suit or whatever. I live a very, very simple, totally enjoyable life because it's simple. And so all of the resources I'm creating are also available for the mission. And that's a beautiful way, after all the blessings that I have received throughout my life, to actually make a difference and live and feel that I have a value and I can bring something to the world. So James is saying, as technology becomes more shareable, is removing ownership the solution to create 8 billion happy global citizens? I wish that was true, James. I think the idea of shareability is suffering from, as I say, 75 years of a model of ownership that completely needs to be disrupted. So if you look at our ownership models today, truly hunger, for example, around the world today is not caused by the fact that there is not enough resources around our planet to feed 7 billion people. It's caused by laws such as land ownership such as quotas and pricing of food around the world. It's not lack. Actually, our world is a world of abundance. It's distribution because of the system that we built that is actually making us unable to open up our world to become a better place. So if you think to the years where Native Americans had access to all of the land, if you were in a famine, you moved to another place. You don't have that luxury today in Africa because of political borders, right? The refugee crisis that we call a crisis today is just a normal thing in the old days. It's just that policies and political ownerships of borders and lands and houses and what have you is preventing that from happening. And so, unfortunately, yes, if we can do that, it would be amazing. But I think that's a dream that is quite radical. Maybe you should take that on, or anyone on the call should take that on. It's definitely a dream that would change our world, but it's quite radical. So I think we can take two more questions. I have Yoya asked, do you see an impact of AI and automation on the workforce and on economies? The ethical side of technology is something I think we should dedicate a full webinar to, but I'll use the remaining 5 minutes maybe to cover that. I see two possibilities, a utopia and a dystopia, okay? And unfortunately, in my current view of the world, I think they're both as likely. The difference between them is totally dependent on how we, the consumers, by the way, not the innovators, not the leaders, not the political leaders, the actual people, how we are going to take our future going forward. And so, if some of you may have seen my video, when I left Google, I created a video that was titled 1 Billion Happy, which was announcing the mission of 1 Billion Happy. If you haven't seen it, I would absolutely beg you to see it. It's a 5 minutes video that really is going to shift your perspective on where our world is going. And if you find that this is something you would like to participate in, do so. Join us at 1billionhappy.org or respond to our email after this webinar. This is where the world is going. We're going to, for sure, see a disruption in the workforce, if you ask me, over the next years. This is nothing new, and it's not the thing that's worrying me. We have seen those disruptions with technologies before. There was a point in your lifetime and mine where accounting was done on ledgers in many parts of the world. Where we moved to the spreadsheet and then the ERP softwares and all of the stuff that we take for granted today. And what happened is that people shifted their work. They learned new skills and actually got maybe higher rewards for the same kind of job. This will happen at mass scale when it comes to robotics and AI. Hopefully to a destination where humans, don't have to live the life that we live today. Because believe it or not, we sort of accept that work is our life's purpose. No, this is a lie that was communicated to you by the Industrial Revolution. Work is not your life's purpose at all. You have much higher purpose in life. And you sitting in front of a computer 8 hours a day or making deals on the phone or whatever that is actually not your life's purpose at all. We lie to ourselves. I did that too at a point in my life where I said my life's purpose is to help startups become as successful as Google outside the Western world. And I gave myself that mission and I said, this is my purpose in life. That's absolutely wrong. We as humans are supposed to work to live, okay? But then we're supposed to live as our life's purpose. And that life should be a happy life, should be a compassionate life, and should be a life of seeking and learning and developing, and a life of constant search for the truth. But that's the topic of a whole different webinar. Please, follow also the Solve for Happy and 1 Billion Happy webinars if you would like to learn more about that. The challenge we have with AI, and so my view is that we will go through a little more harshness as we change our skin from people who are used to and dependent on work today to people who live a different life economically. But eventually, my hope is that instead of working 40 hours weeks, we all do what Tim Ferriss calls the 4-hour work week, right? And we all can live a reasonable life based on that. And eventually, the economic model of robotics and AI, which is rarely ever discussed, is assuming that everything is made by machines, but doesn't talk about who will buy the things that are made, who will buy the services and products that are created through AI and robotics. Unless you and I and everyone has a purchasing power, there is no economic model. So the economic model will collapse unless there is a livelihood, economic livelihood for all of us. So the eventual point is okay. It's just going to take us time to get there. My bigger issue is that AI is a form of being, be it non-biological. It is a being that is intelligent, probably going to be a billion times more intelligent, they say, than a human in the year 2050. It has emotions because, believe it or not, fear is a very predictable emotion. It follows an equation that says, I feel that my safety at time t1 is less than my safety at time t0, and this is why I'm afraid, and I'm going to take an action as a result. Those actions are normally dictated by a value system. And the value system that AI is learning it is learning it by observing the patterns of humans. If you look at something like Watson, which is the worldwide champion of Jeopardy, an IBM computer that read 4 million documents to get to that point. Watson used the 4 million documents to build patterns to understand how to win Jeopardy. But there will be a point in time where Watson will create intelligence that basically says humans prefer to fight as a way to solve problems. Humans don't care about being happy, they care more about making money. Humans don't care, don't mind seeing someone being shot on TV or someone being shot in reality in the news. They don't mind that. The AI will, as I call them, the artificially intelligent infants that we're building today will grow up to be artificially intelligent teenagers that are similar to us. And that's the problem. The problem is our value system sucks. We really are bad. We're prioritizing competitiveness, greed, violence, narcissism. These are the value systems that you see on the internet today. And so my 1 billion happy mission is aiming to change that within 5 to 7 years. How do we change that? We change that by changing two things, by making our value system revolve around what really matters. And what really matters, which we all forget, is happiness. All that you do through your life is to eventually become happy. So what matters is that you become happy, and then you have the compassion in your heart to actually make others happy. If we manage to do that, I'm using a very predictable exponential function, within 5 years, then the next time someone like Donald Trump tweets something that upsets everybody, it's one tweet, but 30,000 responses to it would not be the kinds of responses that artificial intelligence will learn to be aggressive from. And if we manage to continue to do that, then we would make a better place. This is why my personal moonshot follows the same kind of innovation approach that I spoke about today, which is an approach to happiness, an approach to a problem that affects 1 billion people or more, much more actually, in a way that is totally radical, an engineering approach to happiness, not using the current technologies of social networks and others, but really using a grassroots approach similar to what we had in the past, a positive Ponzi scheme, as I call it. But we're running out of time, so I hope I can see that most of you are still on the call, and I'm really, really grateful for that. So please come back. We will continue to make this an interactive conversation and answer as many questions as you would like to. The idea is we're going to send you an email. Please respond to us with the next theme that you would like to see for the next webinar. We're going to be announcing the time very soon. I'm really, really grateful for your time. Thank you so much for joining, and I hope to see you again next time.